HO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. but this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning into In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
I to the M to the HO Talk Show. How you doing, Miss Max?
All right.
Doing good today?
All right. Yeah, doing real good. Looking forward to the show. Welcome to all of our listening audience, those who are currently tuned in, those who will be very soon, very shortly. Looking forward to the show.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Quick wellness check. With all that's going on in the world today, IMHO is still on your airwaves, and we much appreciate all those who are tuned in for yet another ride, yet another Sunday, Miss Max. And we're gonna give it to them like we always do, but tell a friend that we are live and direct right now. If you're listening to this voice on this last live show that we have of this March, Max, and through all the info we've been remembering our sisters, including yourself. Sometimes you got to pat yourself on the back, Miss Max.
That's right.
For this Women's History Month, and so we're gonna keep that vibe going, but sprinkled in there though, the brothers want to come pay a little respect too. So
I reckon y'all can get in on this. I reckon.
So at the end of today's show, the last hour, our man David is going to join Yolanda.
Okay.
And, you know, the good folks,
Right.
you know, David and Yolanda, New Hill Development, talking about that Beacon Kitchen that's going to have their grand opening in a couple
Very
weekends.
soon. That's right.
Very, very, very soon. So the community's been looking forward to that. And middle of the show, we're going to have the young man. I guess he's our new political analyst.
Is that right?
Right. Jason Melendez, young brother, doing his thing. Very, very informative, very, very educated.
Yeah.
Knows the system in and out. So it's always good to have somebody like that, you know, on speed dial to ask these questions.
That's right. That's
have
right.
these conversations.
An expert.
You know, because we talking about
make us upset and angry and depressed and all those things. We need that, you know.
we need that.
No, we need to stay informed.
Yeah, for sure. You know, sometimes when we in the barbershops and salons, or we sitting, you know, or like we just, you know, around the table in the living room, wherever we may be, there's like some is truth, some is conspiracy. So it's always good to be able to have that balanced table to break it down and have the questions answered. You know,
for sure.
Yeah, but without further ado, after all that is said, we have a young lady with us to kick off this first hour, kick off this first segment. I'm just so delighted that she obliged our invitation and she is joining us right about now. Yes, indeed. So proud of the work that she is doing, and I know the listeners have heard some of the names of her many brands. She has a diversified portfolio, as they say. I'm talking about none other than Lisa Woolfolk, the queen of Black Women Stitch. Lisa, how you doing today?
Good afternoon. Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. And it has been a long time coming. I was like, well, I got to come all the way up to Boston to get an invite. But okay, friends.
We're sorry about that, but we got you now. We got you.
Listen, no, I'm great. No complaints whatsoever. I am so great. You say God's timing is always perfect. So this is as it should be.
There you go. There you go. And so, Lisa, for those that don't know, you know, we're gonna get the full story from you. You know, your history, what inspired you, what got you in to all that Black Women Stitch is all about. But for those who may not know, Black Women Stitch is the sewing group where Black lives matter, centering women, girls, and femmes in sewing while promoting the principles of Black liberation, radical self-love, and social justice. And she does that through so many avenues, as I said, Max, podcasts. And I know different social groups, but like the way that she names these things though is just like it's so funny, like, but it's so poignant and it makes sense though. Like her podcast, you know, is called Stitch Please. And if I'm not mistaken, she has what is it? You have a book coming out called Stitch Better Have My Money. Did I get that right, Lisa?
Stitch Better Have My Money is our fundraiser. So
the fundraiser.
Stitch Better, BETA, even better. StitchBetterHaveMyMoney.org is the name of our fundraiser. Just to kind of say, hey, you know, hashtag Pay Black Women. We know how we lag behind in terms of payment. And once I realized that my grandmother, who was born in 1913, spent her entire career going through white folks' back doors, I was like, you know what? Y'all need to run me my money and hers. So please, yes, please.
Very creative. I like it.
Yes, indeed. So Lisa, tell us the sort of the origin stories, because everything that you do, right, is you know, with your outreach of uplifting Black lives, in particular of Black women, it's through stitching. That's like the foundation, right? So how did it come to be that was the avenue that, you know, like that you found that passion for, to do such, you know, great activism, really, and to do such great empowerment?
That's such a beautiful question. I thank you for the opportunity to share the story. It is very much a Charlottesville story. And like many people in our community during the years of 2016 and 2017, led in many ways by the work of Ziona Bryant and other organizers to remove our Confederate War, our Civil War participation trophies from public space. And I was very active in that. It just felt outrageous to me that our public dollars were going to support tokens of white supremacists, a failed white supremacist republic. And so had done a lot of organizing in that summer of hate, as it's been called, including working with the Bail Fund for activists, sewing for a creative arts team, teaching, as much as I could do to show my displeasure. And it was more than just being offended. It was being outraged that this type of idea was still so active and present in what I considered, a modern current time. The idea that the Klan was still marching and still trying to intimidate and still trying to purport this false illusion of white supremacy. It's fine. Y'all go ahead and believe it, but you're never going to convince me. So I was very active during that time. And on the day of August 11th, I was interviewing with Cornel West for an article about the rise of fascism. And that's when the white supremacists had marched on the grounds of UVA, attacking community members and students that had gathered there. And then the next day, you might recall, is when the largest white supremacist rally of the time had taken place. And it ended up being called a state of emergency, and the white supremacists were meant to be expelled. And I believe in an outrage that had happened, a white supremacist drove his car down. It's hard for you to remember all those details, though I have them etched in my brain forever, down the street and murdered Heather Heyer and injured dozens and dozens of other people. And I was standing there at the intersection when the car came through. And so it was just a horrible, shocking time for many people. And some folks are still dealing with the fallout from that catastrophe. But I decided, against my now better judgment, to go to a quilt retreat. There was a quilt retreat outside of town that I had been going to for 15 years. And when my father died unexpectedly, I was there at that retreat, and those women made me a quilt. They were very, I thought I was in community with them until I arrived after the events of August 11th and 12th. And that is when it became clear to me that the community, that white quilting community that I thought I was a part of, I was actually just being tolerated as long as I could behave in a way that felt palatable to them.
And what gave you that revelation?
Yeah.
That's so when I arrived, I had been working you get assigned into these small tables. There's like 18 tables, 2 people sit at a table, and I had a table mate that I had had for many years. And she leans over to me and says, well, people had come up to me asking me, oh, Lisa, I saw you on TV, or I had heard about this, or my church is praying for Charlottesville. That was just awful. What happened? And I was told that an announcement had been made, not in my presence, but an announcement had been made that Charlottesville was not to be discussed. And you might think that, oh, they were doing this because they wanted to spare my feelings. They didn't want to bring up something that I might have been struggling with. But that's only because you don't know these people. They had no interest in what was happening with me. They were much more concerned about their own comfort. And so I was just rather shocked by it. I was like, well, I did not come here to discuss this topic with you all. You are not the target audience for me to process this with. So I had no intention of doing that. But what became most obvious to me was a few weeks later, after that event had transpired, after I packed up and put my things in the car and said goodbye to the organizer. She did not look at me. She did not speak to me. And about 3 to 4 weeks later, I received this envelope in the mail. And when I opened the envelope, it was my check that I had written for the next year's event. My check. My check had been sent back. Now, Miss Max, my dumb self, I thought, well, maybe maybe the event has been canceled. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it's been canceled. And so I contact the table mate that I had had for many years, and I asked, I said, well, do you know if the event for March has been canceled? And she was like, no, I don't think it's been canceled. But if you your check back, that's probably because you broke the rules.
Mm.
And the rule was that Charlottesville was not to be discussed, and you discussed it.
Mm.
I don't think she's prejudiced or anything. I just think that it was a rule and you discussed it.
Mhm.
When I tell y'all, listen,
Snitch.
listen,
Bitch.
I was so hurt.
Mhm.
So I'm already coming on the heels of surviving a white supremacist terror attack,
Mhm.
coming on the heels of a lot of very heavy organizing
Mhm.
with meetings and plans and presentations and,
Mhm.
just in a lot of media work for co-founding the Media Collective to connect. I mean, it was just a lot of work that I was doing as I saw it in the name of assuring Black freedom. That was my goal. That was why I participated, so that my kids would not have to be out in these streets. Let me do it now so you don't have to do it later. That is what I thought the whole time.
Mhm.
And I was so crushed. I was so
Mm.
sad. I felt like I had survived this terrible thing and now I had lost something that was important to me.
Mhm.
And then after I stopped being sad,
Then you
I
got
got
angry.
before sad, but anger is eventual, but after the sadness, embarrassment.
Mm.
I was embarrassed. I was
Mhm.
like, who did they think I was
Mhm.
all this time
Mhm.
that I was palatable for them
Right.
until I spoke up specifically about valuing the lives of my children.
Mhm.
And after that embarrassment, and I was like, they never saw they never saw me for who I actually was.
Mhm.
Um, and then that's when I shifted to the anger. The anger, I was like, I bet these people are right now using me as an example in some argument that they're not racist. I'm
Mhm.
not racist because I know this professor and I've been knowing her for years. And
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
always pulling these magical Negroes out of their
Mhm.
back pockets for any
Mhm.
argument. And so I thought,
Mm.
and that's when I decided I was hurt, I was wounded, and I wanted a space. And so I decided right then and there, I said, never again would
Mhm.
I audition my humanity
Mhm.
in exchange for doing something I loved.
And before that time, you never
Thank
felt
you for that.
like this was a very superficial relationship or engagement, or that you were being tolerated and these people weren't actually your friends?
I love that question because our relationship was very provisional. These are
Mhm.
people that I saw once a year for 15 years.
Mhm.
We would spend a long weekend together. We would be quilting, we would be talking. And the nature of this kind of gathering is not just about the sewing, it's a lot about the kind of community building that happens in the space itself.
Mhm.
So we might have conversations around like our kids, and
Yeah.
there were indeed times, often,
Mhm.
where microaggressions would
Mhm.
happen. This was something that
Yes.
I was just like, well, it was an extension. It felt like an extension of just all the other stuff I was doing, which was like working
Mhm.
at a predominantly white institution, living in a predominantly white city. And I I knew that it was conditional. I
Mhm.
knew that these weren't folks that I would go and have lunch with or invite to the house. It wasn't that we had a close relationship beyond this
Mhm.
particular event.
Yeah.
Mm.
But what I didn't realize was the the actual hostility that was hiding behind their apathy / politeness.
And you may have mentioned this, but you were the only person of color in the group?
I was always the only Black person and always the youngest person, even when I wasn't young. And so that made for another kind of distance, I think. But, you know, we all came through the love of craft. It was because we all loved this particular thing. And I was able to connect. And it wasn't until apparently advocating for Black lives was a bridge too far. And that was when I decided that I needed something new. Now, there is a lot of racism in lots of different craft and sewing groups. If you go on Facebook, for example, everyone that I have ever been involved with that is a predominantly white craft group has always had something horrible pop off. And, you know, my brother-in-law was telling me this years ago after I had some incident with some terrible person in a craft group. And I'm just like, I just wanted to learn how to make this pattern. I do not know why I have to be exposed to all your toxicity. Go get some therapy and leave us alone. But
let me ask you this then. You know, because I'm sure you can understand, especially being a businesswoman now, and I'm not sure what preceded, you know, like any business endeavors before Black Women Stitch, but there is a such thing as sort of a safe space, right? And that can be even when we are at our places of employment, or whatever, or it could be a social group, right? You know, such as this, where folks say, look, we want to get away from all of the politics and everything. This group here, let's leave that on the outside, right? So can you sympathize with that? Or do you feel like it was racist? In other words, do you feel like that if something would have happened to one of their white children, do you think the discussion would have happened? Or do you think they really were being fair and neutral?
And, you know, not just that, before you answer, is that when I at least think, I'm no stitcher, but when I think of stitching, you know, that's peaceful and calm and quiet, and everybody's talking like this, you know, like it's a place where we can commune and convene and connect with one another. I mean, for Pete's sake, you're stitching, like metaphorically or symbolically, that means something. So I'm really taken aback by the response, but go ahead.
I love this question because this was never an environment where it was leave your politics at the door. So, for example, the person who was responsible for putting together this particular event would often tell the story about how she's a white woman, she would get pulled over by the police for refusing to wear her seatbelt. That was just something she did routinely. And she would tell the officer, just give me my damn ticket and get out of my face. So so there were moments like that, or things like, oh yeah, I got to make sure I keep my gun in the car, or like it was a completely, the more I, after many years of working with them or talking with them in groups similar, I started to realize that we had some very different social priorities. We had very different lives. And then to have everyone like say, oh, sure, that's exactly how you're supposed to treat the police, but then have no tolerance whatsoever for a Black woman like Sandra Bland, who was essentially murdered for doing the exact same thing. And so there is, I think, Max, you definitely hit on it, that for many people, they want to say that sewing is their happy place and that all of the politics go out the door, everything, nothing else matters. But it's not true.
Yeah.
That is not. Yes, it's just not true. And that for me, when I find this as it occurs in the sewing space, especially quilting, quilters are particularly combative. I don't know what it is, but there is listen, let me
No,
tell
that's
you,
interesting.
when you said that stitching is supposed to be peaceful, I was thinking, ooh, she's never been to a gift.
No.
Because when I tell you those folks, oh, where do you get that from? You shop at Joann's? That's where you get fabric instead of
Wow.
from this place? Oh,
Mhm.
you're using that brand. Ugh, that's what you like. I'm telling you. Like, and don't let somebody's quilt not be in the show. These quilters have beef going back decades. This is not just silent, peaceful women who are just happy to be running needles through thread. That is not it. That is not it at all.
That's
It is
interesting.
incredibly intense. Like if you go to different quilt shows, there's people that will do things like deface the different quilt descriptions, demand that they be taken down. Like
Wow.
there is a lot of politics in the quilt game. And even folks in the sewing industry recognize that is a thing.
Yeah.
with
Yeah. So,
quilters.
the first thing I want to do is actually just applaud you because it says something, I think, about having experienced such a tragedy, and it talks to the beauty that can come out of ashes, so to speak, by you then using that experience and the emotional roller coaster tragedy that you were dealing with to then create from that. And I think it says a lot about you as an individual, but it's innate to us as human beings. But I want to applaud you for that, because there could have been a different response, and you sought one that would help people grow and come together out of that experience. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing that I want to mention is that for many of our listening audience, you didn't describe anything new in terms of your experience with your white counterparts while at this retreat, right? And for others, they may be completely surprised. And I say that to say that we as Black women or non-white women, I think males deal with this, but that's a whole different dynamic. But as any non-white woman deals with that whole issue generally, right? I mean, I think that a lot of us walk into spaces where we feel like we're immediately on guard because we don't know whether or not we are being accepted or tolerated in the space. So let me put up my defenses now, let you know what you ain't gonna do while I'm here, right? Which ain't right, no way to live and be forced to function. Or we operate naively in situations where we think we are part of something that we really aren't. And just the sheer impact, whether we are processing it or not, understand it or not, aware of it or not, that is, I'm not going to call it trauma, but that is,
could be.
That's a thing that we as non-white women have to deal with as part of our lives. It's something that we have to be accepting of. This is how it is for us to exist. And so we figure out how to maneuver through that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or assimilate, right? Like just blend in because it's the norm.
Yeah.
Or keep your head down. Keep your head down, keep your head down to get through it. But I think because I do work.
Nobody should be forced to live like that.
Yeah.
Agreed. I absolutely agree. And what I see in it and what I am grateful for is I was able to take my own wounding and to create something that was reparative for me and also healing for other Black women. I think one of the things that Black Women Stitch tries to offer is a comfortable, soft place for Black women to land. That I have heard from quite a few folks who they might not have, of course, been in Charlottesville or had the Charlottesville experience, but they have had the experience of thinking that they were part of this community, only to find out when everyone decided to sew a Confederate flag quilt that they really weren't included the whole time, or that there has been that some other form of overt or covert racism or just disregard, being rendered invisible, disposable. Those are the things that Black Women Stitch is never going to do. That this is this is a circle that starts and ends with us. And one of the things I like to talk about is the ancestral craft of sewing, and how sewing itself, as I like to talk about it, is not just this amazing and wonderful art form, which of course it is, but that it is also a way to access a type of creativity that precedes colonization, mastery, white supremacy. We recall that Audre Lorde says that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And one of the things that I've discovered throughout my research and looking at the archaeology of sewing is that the sewing needle is older than the wheel as a tool. And we know how much the wheel helped to advance human history.
Right.
But thousands upon thousands. The first one that they found was in a cave in South Africa. That's 60,000 years old. They found another sewing needle, that one that looks very much like what we use today. They found that one 40,000 years ago in a cave in Siberia. In China, 30,000 years ago, they found another sewing needle. So what excites me about that is that 30,000 years pre-history, pre-socialization, the ways that humans would move across the earth, pre-domination and war, there were human people who wanted to make clothes for their bodies. And what I have noticed in my work on the podcast and talking to people is that when Black women stitch, when we are creating things for ourselves, a form of liberation follows.
Right.
This is what's being enacted, I believe, when Black women stitch. When we stitch clothes, especially for Black plus size women, which is what I've been talking about a lot lately. That when Black women are sewing today, we are undermining, we are unraveling centuries of sedimented anti-Blackness, anti-fatness that has been baked into the fashion industry, the garment industry, merchandising about where you can find clothes for plus size people in stores. All of that is something that gets sidestepped when you are making things yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a really great freedom practice. It's an important freedom practice as I see it.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think of, Lisa, is what, and that was so beautifully said, but what makes me think of is how so many things in our history, you know, within Black history, within African-American history, that gets taken and it gets even like demonized, right? And then later down the road, we realized that it was taken and demonized because folks knew the power of it, because they knew that if we knew where we came from and what we started, how empowering that would be. And like, so you made me think of that as well, because like when you talk about plus size and whatnot, it's like, think about the modeling from decades ago, you know, as you said, and how you're supposed to be the most petite, right? The smallest, all that kind of stuff. And now it's like people are having surgeries to try to look like an African woman.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's those things, how everything comes full circle when things that we we're told to feel ashamed about
Yes.
is actually the best things about us.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what's so amazing about that is that if we, and I was talking about this a little bit, when you think about Sarah or Sarjay Bartman, a Black woman who was known for having a very large butt at the turn of the, I think, 1700s into the 1800s. And this woman was exhibited, she was mocked, she was derided. And when she died, the person that had exhibited her, Cuvier, took her remains, like chopped up her actual body and put her buttocks floating in a jar at the museum. I think they call it the Museum of Human, I forgot the English translation, but a French museum had this woman's remains until like 2010 or 28. I mean, like it was recently that her body was restored to her South African community. And only to have this woman, this Black woman, and her butt being on display. And about 50 years later, the Victorian era, or those folks, start wearing something called the bustle. A bustle is something that you would add, like a pillow that you would add to the back of your dress and drape fabric over it. Also, they could have the silhouette of looking like they had a big ass. That was the whole point of it. Now they've derided her and exhibited her and shamed her and used this to say, look at the savagery of the African, blah, blah, blah. And then 70 years later, big asses in fashion, and they are creating, by sewing, garments and structures to look like her.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by none other than Lisa Woolfolk, the executive, the CEO of the Black Women Stitch Enterprise. Right? Does that sound good, Lisa?
Listen, y'all, I can tell you, there's folks on my team who know that I have struggled for years to think about Black Women Stitch as a brand.
Oh, I know.
I've struggled to think about it as a business. I have for the longest thought about it and continue to as a project. And I don't know, and I know it's because of my mistrust of capitalism and what happens when things get turned into businesses, or it feels as though you're no longer committed in the way that you were. But that's my own unlearning that I'm working on as well, because we can call it whatever it needs to be called in order for it to be sustained.
There you go.
And what I would like this to be is sustained. We have such amazing stories. We have talked with such wonderful artists right here in the Charlottesville community. I have 2 episodes with Sahara Clemens, who is an amazing artist who I know has worked with CIM and the wonderful work that you all do. And I interviewed Sahara when she was at RISD in her very first year. And then I interviewed her at the end of her time when she was preparing to go to New York. She had just finished New York Fashion Week, and she was preparing to head to Paris for Fashion Week. So to be able to document the story of what her creative journey was from an artist into a fashion designer with formal training, into a fashion designer exhibiting on runways in the most prestigious of shows, has been one of the great blessings of this show. To kind of, we have an archive of over 270 episodes with talking with so many different amazing people, as well as interesting projects, histories, and things like that. I think the archive is what I really appreciate and feel is necessary, especially when you see how hard they're working to abolish anything favorable about how we move and create in the world.
That's right.
So I have to ask, do you have any white members?
It's not a membership organization in that way. It is not a membership organization in that way. It is a site for generating, as I see it, gatherings and experiences
Okay.
It is also fueling the podcast,
Okay.
which is, I think, at this point, our major project.
Okay.
I'm fortunate to say that we have supporters and listeners from all around the world.
Okay.
And in fact, the show has been heard in 83% of the world's countries. There's people that are listening in China. There's people that are listening in Japan. There's people that are listening in Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, folks listening in Spain, folks, in England and Ireland. So Canada is also a top. One of my favorite ones is Australia and New Zealand, and some of those folks have been so cool enough as to write me and send notes and say, "Hey, I just love what you're doing. Thanks so much. I've just been learning so much." So I think it's important that what this project is doing is centering Black women, girls, and femmes. It is centering us because we deserve to be the beginning. We deserve to not be an afterthought. And this is why I've always said I don't see Black Women Stitch as a DEI project. I'm not trying to get a seat at anyone's table. This is our table. This is the table. We are the table. We set it up. We decide what's going to happen next. And so that's what I have been working toward. And so it is not deliberately excluding anyone. It is instead making a choice to concentrate on what I guess one could say is underrepresented folks, but I don't see us as underrepresented. I see us as life. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family of Black folks who loved liked other Black people. So I think that there are many folks, unfortunately, who see something as Black and they see it as lesser. They see it as not as good as, and that is not. I don't have that. I don't have that at all. And in fact, I think I have the opposite view, that there is a difference between all are welcome here and this was created with you in mind.
I like that. And Lisa, let me throw this at you, because you mentioned the diversity.
Is it money? You finna throw some money at me? You can put it in the fundraiser at www.stitchbetterhavemymoney.org.
Before you ask that question, I just want to make a comment about what you just said, Lisa. Like I have to say that I do think that for those very reasons, because of the experience of the Black woman, we are much more supportive and open and accepting, and have a lot more empathy and sympathy. There's exceptions to the rule, but for individuals. And I think others, non-Black people, recognize that in us, which is one of the things that gravitates them to different spaces that we hold. And so when you talk about the different nationalities who are in some way connected to your organization, it makes sense. Because they know that about us.
Yes. And I think I guess I'd want to kind of ask as well. I feel like Black women have a certain degree of what one might call radical hospitality. Does that make sense to you?
Perfect sense.
And I think
some people may not like that. There are Black women who don't like that.
Yes.
But no, it makes perfect sense.
Yes. And so I think what I am trying to do and what I try to model for others is that it is okay for us to choose ourselves. It is okay to choose ourselves and to choose each other. And this does not mean that we are, don't want or don't like or are hostile to other folks. It's just that for me, it has been an essential healing space to be able to turn to other Black women who are interested in being in community with Black women. And so I called it Black Women Stitch when I could have called it anything. But I was trying to offer a healing space, an invitation for us to examine our creative capacities
Mhm.
and to extend the benefit of those to ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that there's something useful about that. I think there's something healing about that.
Mhm.
And that is something that I have been really excited about to kind of work on
Yes.
as Black Women Stitch continues to grow.
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry, Charles.
Thank you. No, you good. You good. It's good convo. We are joined by Lisa Wolfhook of Black Women Stitch. So, Lisa, here's what I'm thinking, because another common thread that we've been discussing.
Oh, a thread. I love that.
That we've been discussing a lot. So it's been running through our show and sort of the themes for these interviews. Even here in Women's History Month, celebrating that, we know that during the current political climate, right? And again, as you mentioned earlier, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I like saying it out because I want people to know that are against it. I want them to say it out loud what they're against, right? Because the letters don't do it justice. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? When we think about the bare necessities of life, right? Talk about food, clothing, shelter, arguably the top three.
Yes.
So we've had, Black farmers on, and as I was talking to you even before this interview, such as yourself, the sustainability of being able to clothe ourselves, the sustainability to be able to, to master this craft. So can you talk a little bit about that, about the just the raw importance of us supporting not just Black clothing brands, but let's say that the ultimate happens that's being tossed out there of like we may have blackouts, like we may have to get off the grid and we can't order. So we may need to know who's in our community, who's reachable, that that can provide this type of necessity. So can you talk about that, about the importance of what you do?
I really appreciate that, because I think something that gets lost all the time is that everything you are wearing right now was made by someone.
Mhm.
Everything you're wearing was made by someone. And my rejoinder is always, why not you? Why not you? Why are you not the one? And I think it's because I have this belief, this kind of radical faith in people's, the innate power of human capacity. I really do believe that anybody can make anything. I have made things from shoes, umbrellas, raincoats, baby clothes, quilts, I have absolutely done it. And I think that others can do it too. I also believe that this can be a way to reduce some of the harms that come with fast fashion, with buying, the clothing hauls that people get, and they get them in hauls, like, a bag of here's 10 outfits and it costs me, I don't know, I don't shop, so I don't know, $50. I don't know how much things cost. But I do know that it takes about, I think, 100 gallons of water to make a t-shirt. And that our current approach to hyper consumerism of buying, the way that Shein, for example, has 1,000 styles a month or something, that one is always meant to be in the process of buying something. And the people that are making it are people that are in the global South, people that are exploited, people that are essentially, in some ways, I remember reading that the Haitian workers in Haiti who sew, I'm not going to say the brand, but sew this particular underwear brand, were making 60 cents a day. And they wanted more money. They wanted to strike for more money. But then the US stepped in and said, no, you may not strike. You may not, this 60 cents you are getting paid to make these underwear is all you deserve. And so there's a lot of geopolitics, a lot of things that happen where other people around the world are being harmed so we can have cheap goods. And that is untenable. That cannot last forever. And so I think there's a lot of ways, as you were saying, Charles, that with the diversity, it just feels so shameful truly, to say that I live in an America that explicitly hates diversity, explicitly hates, what was the other one? Diversity, equity. An America that hates equity, an America that hates inclusion. And that we have a governor who says that this is restoring us back to the that by eliminating these departments at the University of Virginia, for example, is restoring Jeffersonian values. I'm like, oh, really? That's what we're interested in? So everyone gets to impregnate a 13-year-old now? Is that what we're doing? If these the values we're gonna get back to, do I get to own 605 people throughout the course of my lifetime? Is that something I get to do as well? And even Jefferson himself, this person wrote this in a letter to a friend. He said this about slavery. He said, he says, I tremble for my country when I remember that God is just and that his justice will not sleep forever.
That's a whole
And I tremble for my country when I remember this, because there is no aspect of the Almighty who would side with us in such a conflict. He was saying that he knew Thomas Jefferson knew that God did not side with the enslaver. There is no aspect of the Almighty who could side with us in such a conflict. This man knew that what he was doing was wrong while he was doing it.
That's right.
And yet, somehow, the real problem is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And another thing that I love to say out loud is it's important to make this plain. What it is trying to authorize is the idea that we are all meant to get accustomed to white men being the top of all things at all times. That is what we're meant to be accustomed to. So it's somehow telling the lie that for every excellent Black person who is good at their job, who is amazing on the microphone, who is well studied, who gets an amazing LSAT score, there is a white person out there that is better. That is what it is saying. And we know that is just an utter lie. It is a total lie. Just statistically speaking, it is a lie. Yeah, they're not going to play him. I said, look, you can lie to yourself, but I'm not going to let you lie to me.
Yeah. You said, don't play in my face.
Sorry. No, thank you. I'm not interested.
That's right. So we are joined by Lisa Woolfolk of Black Women Stitch. And Lisa, we're going to have to go ahead and get on your calendar to have you back in not too long, because we are up against the hour. But definitely want you to let folks know, because we mentioned sort of the different spinoffs of Black Women Stitch. But go ahead and let folks know, the different entities and like how they can follow it, how they can learn more about it, how they can donate to Stitch Better Have My Money.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you both so much for this really stimulating conversation. I am honored by both of your voices, and thank you for thinking of Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. So the Stitch Please podcast can be found wherever you get your podcasts. We were recently featured in February by Apple Podcasts. So we were at the top of the browse page for 10 days, and that was really lovely. You can find us also on, we are apparently an Alexa skill. So if you ask your spy bot to play the Stitch Please podcast, it will. It's also, you can find it Pandora, Audible, etc. You can also join up if you go to blackwomenstitch.org. Thank you for sharing the link in the comments. You can sign up for our newsletter. The Stitch Please podcast has over 270 episodes in our archive, and we have recently shifted to an episode every other week rather than every week. So I could write a book called Black Women Stitch Liberation, which is what I'm working on right now. And if folks are interested, there are links to a talk I'll be giving tomorrow at Wellesley College talking about this research and talking about the really liberatory elements of plus size Black women sewing and what that means for the sewing industry and creativity more broadly. So thank you again for this beautiful opportunity. I'm so honored, and I hope I did good enough to be invited back, because I
Well,
totally want to come back.
you're doing it, girl.
Oh,
You,
you know
you
that.
will definitely be back.
You know that, Ms. Max.
Yeah, no, thank you. Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I can't wait to have you back. I had no idea that talking about stitching could be so enlightening and inspiring and lively, right? So again, thank you for everything that you're doing. We appreciate you. We do hope you'll come back. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that Black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially Black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m. Either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles in the booth, in the building one more again. Max, is your mic on? Talking for?
So. Here we go. Mic check. 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, I was having a little issue. Go ahead and plug the
Sound
back
check.
of that mic in a little bit for me. The cord. Yeah. All right, let's try that again.
Sound check. Mic check.
That's a little better. It's a little better. But without further ado, you could be anywhere in the world, but you are here with us. And we appreciate that. IMHO Talk Show is on your airwaves. Wherever you might like listening to your radio, wherever you might like streaming, YouTube, Facebook, IG, all that good stuff.
Yep.
We got it because we got to reach the people. You know what I'm saying, Miss Max?
Make us accessible.
Gotta do that. And so, part of doing that is that having good political analysis. All right. And as we were just talking with our last guest, we would be mistaken if we don't think that bleeds into every sort of aspect and like nook and cranny of our lives. Right. Because the decision makers, mold and shape the outcomes of our community. And so that's why we got to be stepping up. But let me kick this off. And we got Jason up. You don't need an introduction, do you?
No, I mean, it's good
Jason
to be back. I'll just say that at least. It's good to be back.
Coming back, Jason. I'm sorry, because I get so excited about these kind of talks, man. And but Max and Jason, because it was Jason Melendez, for anybody that maybe do join us, got to give him his props, because the young man is very well versed. He's a strategist. You know what? Let me read his X account, because I love this. His X account bio says safeguarding human and civil rights. Right. So I think that says enough. Safeguarding human and civil rights as vice chair of the Seville City Hall Human Rights Commission, and running for at VAYD National Committee representative. So Jason Melendez is once again has been a campaign manager and a strategist in so many ways, and so definitely glad that you don't mind taking out a little time for us, to have these conversations.
Glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. So, but what I wanted to kick it off with is that I try to be an optimist, Max. I try to be a glass half full kind of guy. So in saying all that, the political climate that we're in right now, I can be a little empathetic and be like, I can see a certain aspect of why people would be supportive of the current conservative / Republican agenda for this reason. And y'all hear me out, Jason. No, please don't walk out on me.
I'm listening to you.
But for this reason, because for one, if we go back, we know that Black people were a majority Republican post Civil War, and the reason for that is, for one, the Democrat stronghold was in the South. So Southern whites weren't going to let us participate in that anyway. But we had this idea of that if with freedom, we would be able to capitalize, right? Like we would be able to get our piece of the American pie. And of course, we saw through the years that it wasn't going to be that easy. Like they weren't just going to let us get on equal playing field. And that's when sort of the social aspect of the Democratic Party was obviously more appealing to already communal type people. But my point that I'm getting to is this, Max. If we had got our stuff together by now, it would kind of make sense that we could say, yeah, we could build our own. We could have our own. We could manage our own. We could make our own. We could do all this kind of things as a community. And that's not just Black people. That is people who say that social, supports and social services, quote unquote, is so important. But we are so reliant on systems, on government and whatnot, to where that's not attainable. That's not realistic right now. And so I say all that because when I talk to especially some of my Black brothers, that's the mindset, right? Of well, we don't need to be dependent on the government anyway. Let them just break the whole thing up. Let it be completely free market. Everybody should be able to do what they want to do. Again, that's a delusion of grandeur, that I wish was possible, but I don't think that we're at that point right now. So I wanted to kind of say that. But Jason, you got any thoughts on that?
I say, safety net is an important thing. I think some people don't realize it until they absolutely need it. And perfect example of that yesterday at the Jefferson School, they did the Sleep Out Seville event. I wasn't able to make it myself, but it was. I heard it was great the round table and also kind of experience for folks who participated in that kind of gathering. You really don't understand what it's like until you have to get through it. And that's just one night and you were surrounded by security guards. Imagine what it's like to be sleeping on a street in Charlottesville or any other area for that matter, and not being able to access services. So it's always one of those things where you always discount the need for it until you actually need it.
Spot on.
And I hear you, but that's just simply not the world we live in.
Right.
It serves no great purpose to undo and repeal these different things that are really a support system for those who cannot have access to certain things on their own. And we can't talk about it like this wasn't a systemic or intentional or strategic decision to help put them in the place that a lot of them are in. So no, I disagree. I understand what you're saying. And there are individuals that there's a percentage of individuals that fall in that category who could and should be just fine, should their access to federal assistance be removed. But there are many, many, not just Black people, not just young
Absolutely.
people, not just people having children, not just single parent homes, not just there are many people who will suffer as a
Yes.
result.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think the way I heard it put when Martin Luther King III was here the other day or
And
last week.
ultimately make it for a worse America.
Oh yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
When MLK3 was here last week, kind of the way he put it was, it's like taking a meat cleaver to everything, but you're not even taking a look at what you're cutting before you do it. And I think at a local granular level, we lost the Federal Executive Institute, so that's Charlottesville jobs that are gone. I've talked to residents of Charlottesville who have federal contracting jobs and different federal government jobs that are getting these crazy emails saying, tell us what 5 things that you did last week, or else you consider a resignation. That is just the worst kind of perversion of the federal government probably ever I've seen. So
Yeah, no, you're spot on. We are talking to Jason Melendez, and we're gonna want to go through sort of the current events. Whenever we have them on, want to kind of play catch up, get the updates, and get the facts, out of all of the conspiracies that may be out there, and like all of the keyboard reporters. Sometimes things can get lost in the minutia a little bit. But in all seriousness, like the thing that you mentioned, how FEI was such a cornerstone of the community, and we are seeing things like that play out. But speaking of locally, what can you tell us about what's upcoming? Because June will be here before we know it. So what are the primaries looking like? Because I think like some of our, if not all currently, seats are uncontested, if I'm not mistaken. As far as for the city, for the delegate.
So I'll say for council, it is no longer uncontested. There will be a city council primary via ranked choice voting. So if folks are unfamiliar with ranked choice voting, that's where you rank the candidates in order of preference on your ballot. So we do have, at least at the current moment, 3 candidates on the Democratic side in that primary.
And there's 2 seats open?
2 seats, yes.
Okay,
so it's going to become competitive. As for school board, we've got 4 folks running for 3 seats, but that election's not till November. So they don't do the primary process. No primary going on for any of our state legislative stuff. But we do have, of course, a lieutenant governor primary, an attorney general primary as well. So there's going to be an interesting stream of events. Usually folks engage in Democratic primaries when it's the top of the ticket is the most important race, but we don't have a gubernatorial primary. It's going to be interesting to see who actually shows up to vote for lieutenant governor and downward.
Yeah. So take us through that a little bit with before we go into sort of like what's at stake locally. With the ranked choice voting, because I don't think that we dug into that too much, Max, last time you were here. What are the pros and cons of ranked choice voting? Because there's still a little confusion around it, especially since it's so new, to our locale. But but if you could summarize it, and I don't know if you're 100% on board with it, or do you think that it could have some fallacies to it? But kind of summarize how this ranked choice voting process is going to play out this year.
Good or bad for us?
I say in general, it's a good concept. I think one of the things that is going to be a learning process for Charlottesville is, of course, we elect all of our city council seats at large. Most of the places where you see ranked choice voting used, they have districts. So that's one thing that's going to be, to me, a little bit of a learning curve. But I'll say, like in some really interesting elections, like Alaska, for example, got a Democratic member of Congress from Alaska, which is not normal. But that was because Republicans and Democrats worked together on those RCV ballots to push out the most extreme candidates possible. Now, we usually don't have that issue here in Charlottesville, but I do think there are, so many places where this could actually build consensus candidates. Charlotte, if any place is a good place to be a test pilot for it, Charlottesville might be it. From what I understand, the UVA students had been voting by ranked choice voting for some time, so maybe it's just in our natural order that the city try it. And we'll see how it goes. And
well, I know that Sally Hudson is a major proponent of it and was instrumental in getting this adopted by our local city council. She visited the show and talked about this voting process, and to her best analysis, this method of voting is a way to make the elections more equitable, give greater representation of the folks in the community. You agree?
I would say yes. I think, and for a few reasons. One, it definitely discourages negative campaigning, which can be a force of division. It often will make it easier to run a campaign in terms of finances as well. If you're ranked choice balloting, since you're not competing for that first past the post, it's a little bit easier to raise the money to do what you need to do as a campaign. So I think it's also a lot less intimidating to get into, because you're being ranked. It's not this super competitive, crowded field. You can work with other candidates to get a consensus candidate. So there's a few different reasons why I think it's a good voting system, and we'll be happy to try it out here in Charlottesville at least.
And how's this math thing work? It's ranked choice. It's literally itself. How are the votes split up or divided up?
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best mathematician to answer on that, but I will say, in general, the goal is to have candidates that drive at least the most consensus win. And then with first past the post, where you could end up 6 or 7 candidates running for an office and just plurality wins. The whole goal of RCV is to narrow it down so that you're getting the top consensus candidates. And that's part of the reason why the proponents are heavily in support of it.
Gotcha. So Jason, what can you tell us that's sort of at stake? What are the top issues and that folks are campaigning on now locally? And that's whether we're talking about like Delegate Laufer, whether we look at the city, as far as like what's most important for the council right now, as well as for our school system.
Yeah, I'll say I think in general, a lot of it is how do we forge a sense of stability with so much federal uncertainty. We are, of course, we're not like Northern Virginia where we can immediately feel the impacts of what's going on, but we do feel the impacts, just like with the closure of FEI. But I think everyone's kind of gathered around this whole concept of what can we do to at least keep our community stable and continue delivering services. And I think for our school board folks, it looks like addressing what happens when there may be no more federal Department of Education. For our city folks, it looks like what are we going to do if we lose streams of federal funding? And I think for our state legislators, Medicaid is going to be the big question. Medicaid and other social services programs that are dependent on federal money. As well as there's a few economic development things I think are impactful for Virginia that are going to start to come up in air with the federal government. The Trump administration has expressed its hostility to offshore wind. And of course, that's not an industry that's too close to Charlottesville's heart. But we're an environmental community, but in terms of manufacturing for that, I don't believe we have folks who are involved in that. But the economic development impact of projects like that and clean energy is also in the chopping block, and we've spent so much time in Virginia investing in those kinds of projects. So there's a lot on the line in so many different ways. It seems like everything's on the line, actually.
And the third candidate for city council, I'm sorry, I don't know if we've mentioned that.
I don't think we have. It's Jen Flesher.
Okay. You know anything about her?
Not entirely. Of course, my full disclosure, I do campaign and consultative work for Juan Diego Wade and Brian Pinkston, who are also running in this race. So I just figured that's helpful to throw out there. Of course, Jen works, I believe, with the Blue Ridge Health District, which is our local health arm of the Virginia Department of Health. And she seems like an outstanding candidate.
Yeah.
So
Okay. It will be interesting to see, I think, how that election pans out, only because, as you just alluded to or directly said, there's so much uncertainty. I'm just wondering if the locals are ready to potentially add another element of uncertainty when you have two candidates that you may not necessarily, at least you know what you got. And
that's why I think that's the strongest thing that Brian and Juan bring to the table is that certainty, that strong leadership. And actually, Jen alluded to that in a recent interview she did with NBC 29, discussing how this current council has actually brought a sense of stability back to City Hall, including with bringing in Sam Sanders, who I think has been an excellent choice for the city. And my understanding is we should be having a city attorney come on board soon as well. So that that's going to be super helpful. So at least Jen is certainly acknowledging that these two candidates have done a lot of work to bring Charlottesville to a stable place. As a young person, and housing is near and dear to my heart. And the Human Rights Commission recently did its public survey, and the top answer that folks spoke to was housing. And Juan and Brian are the only candidates in this race that were part of passing that historic zoning ordinance that is starting to actually bring down costs for Charlottesville residents. We're putting so many projects online. So if the real indicators of what's on the mind of the community is to be believed, and I think Juan and Brian stand a really good chance to demonstrate it by their work.
So, Jason, what stood out to me though about what you just said, because that was full of knowledge, right? Is that though? What about the complaint that we get too complacent as Democrats sometimes? Like some people say that we play too nice, right? And not that we do like evil and ugly things like the other side does sometimes, but it's almost like, man, but they leave in their face wide open. Just jab them real quick one good time. We don't always got to be so nice and compassionate, and you know what I mean? Like, even though that is the face of the party, so to speak. And I mentioned that like just because you got to remember, some voters feel like that unless you're really rocking the boat, that nothing's really changing, and then that just looks like that we're cool with staying status quo.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I say that because like when I heard you say, they brought stability back to city council, right? There are a significant portion of our population that believes, city council needs to be shaken up. You know what I mean? Like Charlottesville has too much for us to still be struggling in certain areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to quell those struggles, the stability in City Hall is probably the most essential part to that. I mean, look at the budget that that was just offered. No property tax increases. They fully fund what the school division asked for, including collective bargaining. Making significant progress on bringing that low barrier shelter online, including with the assistance of hopefully state money that Senator Deeds and Delegate Carlson will hopefully be able to bring back from the General Assembly this year. Yeah. So I think the stability has actually worked out in our favor in terms of, looking at all the key indicators in Charlottesville. As a result, GDP growth is one of the fastest local GDP growths in Virginia. So things are moving in the right direction for us. We are a city that, in my view, punches way above its weight class.
Okay.
So I think we were moving in the right direction, and that zoning ordinance was a perfect example of that because it's certainly a first of its class.
And I know we mentioned it a little bit last time too, Max, but like every time a federal cut comes up, particularly this week, I think the biggest has been about the Department of Education, right? You have some who side with it that say that part of what's being done is forcing the hands to balance budgets and to spend more wisely. I've even heard someone say that federally, the money that comes to our schools is minuscule. And if Virginia, as well as other places, got serious about cutting out the fat and really balancing budget and spending wisely, that it's not going to impact us that negatively. Like, so what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. Federal Department of Education is critical for a few reasons. I'll start with the social reason, which is the obvious reason. It was intended to be an agency that would reduce inequity in access to education. And one of the things that I've heard from folks that have kids that are in special education is they don't quite know what comes next for them, because the federal government was, the Federal Department of Education was the agency chiefly responsible for making sure that special education students had equal access to education. For higher ed and many of these grant programs that we fund, Pell Grants and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of uncertainty about what comes next for that. And though maybe the direct aid from the federal government is not always high to every local government, that money still goes a long way. And of course, in Virginia, a lot of our schools, are funded based off of state money. But, federal money helps go a long way. Access to programs like school meals and all that's a big deal. To lose all that, that's going to have ripple effects. Look at Virginia, some of the localities that are most reliant on federal funding are very Republican Trump voting counties, like Lee County. It'd be interesting to see if those members of Congress that represent some of these areas of Virginia that are going to be undoubtedly most impacted, what they'll have to say and if they'll stand up or not.
Yeah. And there needs to be some sort of analysis done on those metrics of like, 'cause when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of times it's like conservative white populations where literacy rates are low, where it's like free and reduced lunch schools, where where like they're dependent on the healthcare system, right? Things like that. And so, yeah, like just getting into the psyche of that on like why you vote against your best interest.
Yeah, I mean, well, because you
is anybody researching that?
There's so many localities up in, I know you referenced the I-81 corridor because there's a number of localities that are not just in Southwest Virginia, but all up and down that western half of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think, I've heard anecdotes of all sorts of grant programs being on the line, criminal justice grants, mental health support grants, local community health clinic grants. I mean, money, is just being cut left and right, and the impacts are starting to be felt now. People are starting to realize it. And it's like at the end of the day, you ask for all for what? It's not, what can we say after the last 8 or 9 weeks that we've gotten out of this? I don't know if anyone can say we've gotten anything positive yet.
Yeah. I would agree.
Can I ask?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you, and I thought about this just yesterday when I was thinking about your interview. How would you summarize what type of nation we're trying to create here with these different type of changes?
I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I'd say chaotic. Okay, if I had to boil it down to one word, it's just straight chaos.
Yes, yeah, and I would, I certainly agree with that. But I can see how inequities will ramp up and different things like that. But, just generally speaking, I'm just wondering myself, what type of world we're headed to? Because there has to be an end goal,
My concern is that there's a few things. One, the federal government's going to stop playing the important role it has always had to play. And then two, the United States as a nation, as a global force, is going to stop playing the role it has long played. And I think, the tariffs are a perfect example of this. Putting tariffs on our northern and southern allies in Canada and Mexico, ripple effects through our economy. This was the same president that signed the United States Mexico Canada trade agreement when he was in office the first time, only to come back and effectively violate that trade agreement by putting on a whole bunch of tariffs. So the strategy's been inconsistent. I feel like they're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks and then confusing the hell out of all of us with all this chaos.
Okay.
Indeed. We are joined by none other than Jason Melendez, political strategist. You got so many titles. Can I call you our political analyst?
Sure, that's more than fine.
But yeah, there's so much more that we can tackle. Jason, how about we take a quick break, and when we get right back to it, and we can kind of scale up and talk a little more, about how the connection with what's happening in our state over the last week. Big news has come down that's impacted our state institutions, and just how that ties in. To the federal government as well, and ultimately how it's going to impact us here locally. All right, so it's Sir Charles Miss Max with Jason Melendez. Hey, keep sending those questions and comments as well, and IMHO Talk Show will be right back.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
And we are still here, still standing, ladies and gentlemen. We are joined by none other than Jason Melendez, our political strategist. And we, we are breaking down politics. It's just so much going on to where, you gotta get that expertise in here, Miss Max. So good conversation on those regards. So where to next, Miss Max? Jason, when we look at, what is it called? The Alien Enemies Act, right? The Alien Enemies Act.
200 some odd year old.
Yeah,
piece of legislation.
Very, very old legislation, right? And speaking of old legislation, and I say that very carefully, but when we think about the Civil Rights Act, and we think about even with our international allies and partners, right, are calling human rights infractions. Like when they look at some of the things that are being done right now. The first question would be is that when you look at legislation, do you feel of course we know where you stand when it comes to equality and fair treatment, right, and all that kind of stuff, but just by definition, do you feel that things like laws that uphold civil rights are needed, or do you feel like that it should be an even playing field, like when it comes to regardless of your race or your sex and all that kind of stuff, right? It's like we all are equal, because that's what's being argued right now, is that even people are trying to say that even civil rights legislation is outdated. It's the year 2025 and everybody has a shot, everybody has a chance, and so we see all the pullback of things that are considered diversity, equity, and inclusion. So so just legally, what's your take on that piece?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the DEI.
Even if we thought that, is the answer to repeal the laws?
Certainly not. I mean, because one, we know civil rights infractions haven't stopped happening. It just didn't stop happening out of nowhere. We see it in housing, we see it in healthcare, we see it all the time. There's so many examples of Black people in the healthcare setting that are denied the proper access to healthcare, housing, source of funds discrimination, which mostly impacts Black single women. All these examples, civil rights violations, they didn't just vanish out of nowhere just because it's been a few decades since the Civil Rights Act passed. But what's funniest about the DEI is that the biggest beneficiary, is my understanding, is white women. If DEI is white women, so and I would love to see more folks who have benefited from DEI that are not people of color to stand up and actually say this is helpful programs. It was unfortunate to see what UVA did and what some of the other universities across Virginia are doing, cutting their DEI offices. But I'm hopeful that they will at least try to work and remain committed to the mission so long as it is possible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like, how do you balance that though? And do you know what the reprimands are? Like, are there reprimand legally in place that says, oh, oh, well, you looked out for this individual because they needed a little extra care? And really, I ask that regardless if the person is white or black or whatever, is like, are there actual like reprimands for folks to be like, ooh, like that was a DI initiative?
I mean, this administration seems to be very interested in wielding the carrot and the stick when it comes to money. It seems to be that's the only lever that they really have is saying it's all money. So every time that something happens, they just threaten to defund something. And that's kind of what they did with the universities. If you didn't do away with the DEI program, then we would just defund you. So,
and when you say administration, you're talking about the governor.
The White House. Yeah.
Okay. The White House or the governor?
Well, maybe perhaps a little bit of both, honestly. Okay. But I don't think Governor Youngkin knows quite what he's doing on a day-to-day basis. For President Trump, the only stick they have is being able to say we're going to take the money away, and that is an important stick. That's an important carrot. No lie about that. But I think universities are going to have to really try and balance and work their way through this as best as possible. But no one should have to work under a microscope like that. It is just, I mean, especially when there is no real violation really happening.
Yeah. So that's a great point, because most of the talk is, okay, the federal government may be pulling this and that, but we're about states' rights, right? We're gonna leave it up to the states, and they kind of like throw the rock and hide their hand by saying that, right? Like it's up to the states, right? Whatever your state does. So then that brings up how important local elections and stuff are, right?
I think folks are learning that in a whole new way now.
Yeah. So I'm curious your take on that though. Is like when it comes around when it comes to states' rights, and like how that affects our localities, right? Is there like talk internally about how we're ramping up for that? Because it looks like maybe we at least got to figure this out for 4 years at least, right?
Yeah.
Like, so how are we going to combat that?
I mean, it's certainly priority number one, at least in the state legislature. Both chambers have committees that are examining what is going on at the federal level and how that's going to impact us, because we have to pass a balanced budget in Virginia. We don't have the option to deficit spend like the federal government can. So we have to find a way to balance what we need to do. And if, we're looking at the, perhaps the precipice of the fall of Medicaid or something, we have to really think about that as a state, how we're going to tackle that. And I feel generally confident that the Democratic Party is, at least in Virginia, is moving in the right direction on messaging on this issue. We just elected a new chair yesterday. Senator Lamont Bagby has been elected the new chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia. So I think we're ready to roll, honestly, these next few months.
Gotcha. Now, how are we going to reach across the aisle, though, Jason? Because I understand your position, and and you got a job to do. And I think anybody who's listened to the show for the past 9 years, Max, know kind of how we lean. So, but all that being said, like we are a community, and we got to live together. We got to work together. Now, there's some people that's like blow this thing up, start it from scratch, right? Some people want Armageddon. It's obvious, but that being said, though, Jason, it's like as much friction as it is right now, you as a strategist, right? Like how do you move forward? Because you and disagree, if you feel you should, but how do you get things done nowadays, man? Because like I look back and I'm like, parties used to want to be bipartisan. Now it's like there's such strongholds, man. So what's the strategy to actually get things done?
Yeah, I'll say in Virginia, we tend to not struggle with that issue too much. Some other states, it's complete gridlock. Of course, DC is complete gridlock. But I'll say, this year
this is unprecedented times. Though.
That's true. Anything is subject to change. But this year we passed 900 bills onto the governor, and bulk of those are by nature bipartisan. Delegate Carlson, actually our local delegate, just passed a math bill that the governor signed yesterday. The only piece of math legislation that we had this year at a critical time when we know that middle school math recovery for Virginia is like the bottom, like 50th. I mean, our middle school students are really struggling with math recovery post pandemic. And that was a piece of bipartisan legislation that was able to get signed. There was a few gun safety bills, believe it or not, the governor approved around firearm safety, I believe firearm safety tax credits and some of the safe storage stuff where there is usually common ground. But one thing I think that we can all agree on is that, getting rid of programs like SNAP and Medicaid is not helpful. The one thing we can all agree on is that tariffs hurts Virginia farmers. Our cattle industry is a big asset for Virginia. Our poultry industry is a big asset for Virginia. They are impacted by the retaliatory tariffs. Our ports will struggle with tariffs as well, and loss of port jobs. So there are so many different ways. Every corner of Virginia is going to learn a different impact about what's going on with the federal government. It's not just going to be Northern Virginia where everyone thinks all the jobs are at. Every corner of Virginia is going to learn what the federal government does for us and how the state is going to have to step in.
So people are going to have to feel it.
Honestly,
that's what you're saying. Like people who are still blind,
I think people might have to feel it
some
first,
pain.
and I think they're starting to feel a little bit. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever wanted to go buy eggs recently, but people are going to start to feel it. I mean, when the tariffs, he's had to flip-flop back on the tariffs so much because it's actually threatening the car industry. Dealerships across the country, including in Virginia, saying, we're going to have to hike prices on cars, or we're going to have to lower the amount of inventory we're bringing in. So folks are really going to start to see this in so many different ways. And it's illuminating because some of the most conservative Republicans out there say that the tariffs are a terrible idea. So that, this administration it's not seemed to be boxed in by a single ideology. It just seems to be boxed in by what can it do to enable itself to do more extremist things.
I think that's a fair statement. I don't know. I feel like this administration is prepared to wield its power, however, and it doesn't. I liken it to like gun laws because people they won't pass stricter gun laws despite how many young children died, despite how many loved ones died, literally a relative, a loved one can be taken and there will be an excuse as to, guns don't kill people, bad people,
our attorney general, our U.S. attorney general, and I guess probably by nature, I have to imagine our state attorney general, Jason Miyares, probably feels the same way too, but they feel more passionately if they see an act of property destruction to Tesla showroom than they do if students are killed at a school. And we just had another mass shooting the other day in New Mexico, but I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. But over a dozen folks impacted by that event. But
I use that as an analogy just to say that I do believe they're functioning with the mindset is that there will be casualties, right? And
they're missing the human element. That's the problem.
Yes.
And that's the problem. When you bring billionaires in the government, you lose the human element.
Right.
But government is not designed with a profit motive. Our job is to support people. That's the job of government.
Until you put
if you put a billionaire in office paired with a businessman who knows honestly the balance of power between Musk and Trump right now. One might have more power than the other one who really should. We're losing the human element here.
That's right.
I mean, even Elon Musk said it himself. He said, there are going to be mix-ups and things are going to go wrong, but it doesn't need to be that way. It really doesn't have to be that way.
Yep. No, I agree.
Now, what about lifers in the government too? Because people would say the same thing that you said, about, like the senators and the congressmen that are in there for decades, right? Do you feel like that even term limits on them could help, or you don't think that that's a part of the crux of the issue?
I wouldn't say term limits are necessarily the solution. We have so many elected officials that are really endeared by their communities. Think John Lewis, for example, served so many terms doing the right thing for all of his lifetime. As far as we know, he was doing the right thing for all of his lifetime, and he continued to serve until his passing. And his community wanted him there. But I think what we need to do is equalize the playing field. And for that's going to take campaign finance reform. We have an opportunity to do that, at least in Virginia. The federal government won't do it to make the playing field even for national campaigns. We can still do that in Virginia. We had some legislation that's working its way this year, didn't quite get there, but the conversation is more ripe now than ever to talk about how we can equalize the campaign playing field so that more people can participate, more people are able to run. So then we wouldn't have to have this conversation about term limits because, I think term limits are inherently not entirely democratic, I think putting a term limit on a legislator is not really useful, honestly. We see the number of political dynasties across the country, including some here in Virginia. We have families of legislators that, just continue to serve. And that's the term limits is not going to stop that from happening. But can't equalize in the playing field. That will.
Be careful, though, Jason, because Trump may use that to his advantage. Like he may say, no term limits for y'all, no term limits for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, he's already talking about it, and that's a little bit concerning, obviously, because we have a constitutional amendment that says no.
He doesn't care about no constitution.
Yeah, I think. Well, he stopped after the Second Amendment. He got to the Second Amendment. That's where he stopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would. It's going to be interesting to see if Steve Bannon is really true to his word, and that Donald Trump is going to run for a third term. That's going to be really interesting to observe because he's already shown a lot of defiance for the judiciary. The judiciary is the last. Well, between them and Congress, they're the last two checks that are left. You know, Congress can hardly do anything, can hardly even move on a given day. And then the judiciary is battling off every single attack. Every time a judge issues an opinion, you know, they get threatened with impeachment. So it's going to be interesting to see this is the kind of stuff that happens in authoritarian nations.
Yes.
This is the kind of stuff that was happening in Hungary. This is the kind of stuff that has happened in Poland in recent years as well. And this is, quite frankly, stuff that happened in Nazi-era Germany, where the attacks on the judiciary, the attacks on the legislature, where the real concentrations of people power is supposed to be, and that is being taken day by day by the executive branch.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it before, but somehow we're still falling for it.
I wish that wasn't the case. I really do.
Yeah. And speaking of that too, like that kind of makes me, what you've been saying, it also makes me think of like our sort of our foreign policy. Is there issues right now within Virginia of our immigrant brothers and sisters who are here legally, whether it's through green card or whatever the case is? Like, have we been seeing an uptick in like ICE agents or like?
So I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because one thing that we saw a few weeks ago, and you may have seen this on the news, I believe it was a gentleman from Prince William County, and maybe it was the city of Manassas, and he actually was here lawfully. He was picked up by an ICE agent, detained for several hours and questioned, and he gave an interview after that experience, and he said, well, I voted for Trump because I didn't think he was going to come after me.
Right.
And
get what you get.
I mean, and the reality is, legal green card holder, he was detained and in question. And we have seen an increase in ICE operations in Virginia, including in Northern Virginia, and not even too far from here. Actually, we've seen ICE activity outside of Charlottesville. And I've definitely heard of some anecdotes in Waynesboro and Stanton, where there's also large undocumented communities. And you know, there are ICE detention centers in Virginia. And you know, I think one of the big questions, of course, Governor Youngkin would like to see more local jails and police departments cooperate with ICE. He doesn't quite have the authority to do it. He can only command state police to do certain things, but we're going to see how that tug of war plays out, especially with this budget that we're, you know, going to negotiate with the governor these next few months.
So true story. I'll just take a minute or two to explain this. I guess it's about 2 weeks ago. I was at the nail salon, and it was near closing. They close at 7 o'clock. Not a business here in the city, and in the middle of getting my nails done, and there's this conversation going on behind me that is getting louder and louder, so it draws my attention to it. And long story short, you have a young, maybe 18-year-old Vietnamese young lady doing an older Black woman's nails. She was probably every bit in her 50s, 60s. And I'm listening to this Black woman, and I can say that, right? I'm Black myself. I'm listening to this Black woman talk to this kid and ask her, is she in the United States legally? To show her her visa, to tell her her visa number, and to insist that her visa should be on display if she's not a citizen of this country.
That sounds exactly like something out of Nazi Germany.
That's some
but to also hear it come from a Black person is even more concerning, because it almost reminds you of if you were a freed person and you had to display your manumission papers with you all the time. So that's just crazy that happened. You know.
Middle of the salon. And at one point, you know, I wanted to, it wasn't none of my business, but with the person being a Black woman, I wanted to be like, what the hell wrong with you?
Why?
Like, this is a child. Don't talk to her like that. But, you know, it was eye-opening to see who all thinks that they have some power and authority here.
Yeah, it's like no one
under
needs to
this.
prove their
Yes.
their citizenship
Yes.
to anybody
Yes.
except for the government if asked.
Right. And it bothered this young girl so much so that she got up and went in the back room, and an older gentleman took over the job, and then she just lit in on him too. How long you been in this country?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it with my own eyes.
Wow.
And I believe it. I
Mhm.
believe it because we, like that shows how, just like Jason was saying about, the folks who get deported, even though they voted for it, is like people think that if they assimilate, to evil, somehow evil is going to be nice to them
Mhm.
because I'm nice to evil.
Mhm.
That's not how evil works.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so,
Mhm.
so yeah, so I think we assimilate even Black folks sometimes thinking, oh yeah, like if I do good enough, if they like me enough,
Right.
and then we'd start acting like the thing that we once despised,
Mhm. Mhm.
So I believe it, Max.
I mean, there was a poet that wrote quite about that very thing, a Jewish poet during Nazi Germany that wrote the poem, Then They Came for Me.
Yep.
And it goes through, well, actually, he wasn't a Jewish poet, but he was a poet in Germany.
Yeah, I
and,
know the
and-
poem, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's, as he goes through it, every community that he didn't speak up for, and then every community had been decimated, and it was only left for him, and there was no one there to support him.
Yeah, that's spot on. But Jason, we are up against the time. But thank you as always for joining us, man. But is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with as far as things that are on your agenda that you want the community that's upcoming that you want them to look out for?
Yeah,
in the
I'll
media?
say continue to be engaged. This is the most important moment. The city's working through its budget process right now, and this is an opportunity for residents to really get involved. We're working with a surplus. Fingers crossed, no one knows what that means these days anymore. But we'll work with a surplus. So there's an opportunity to really do some impactful things, get some projects out of the way that have been kind of backlogged for some time. So just continue to stay engaged any way you can. It doesn't need to be super high maintenance, but at least be informed at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Gotcha. That's good.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
good right there. Till next time. Thank you. And y'all look him up. Jason Melendez out here doing this thing. IMHO Talk Show. Stay tuned.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles.
It's Max.
Yeah, we are back like we never left for the bottom of the show, top of the last hour, all that good stuff. And thank y'all for joining us. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. So tell a friend, IMHO Talk Show, online, WVAI 101 Jams on your FM dial. So, we do big things here in Charlottesville, Max. Like, what's that other thing that we say? Taking Seville to the world, bringing the world to Seville. So as I said, no matter where your family and friends are right about now, let them know that they can stream WVAI, or they can get IMHO Talk Show online.
That's right.
Because we about to talk big business right about now. And so happy and so proud to have these folks that, you know, if y'all watching the stream right now, you can see them in the studio with us. We are joined by none other than New Hill Development Corporation. We have on the mics now. We have Big Q in the back. Big Quentin Harrell, founding board member, is here. But we have the co-founder, CEO, Yolanda Harrell. Miss Yolanda, how are you today?
Wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having us on.
Yes, indeed. And we have the director of Beacon and New Hill Development, Mr. David Givens. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate y'all having us down.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, New Hill Development, you know, I'm sure plenty of folks have heard the name, have seen some of the involvement that you all have been a part of and have curated. But now we're approaching the grand opening of I know is a milestone for what you all wanted to accomplish. So in a couple Saturdays, April 5th at noon is going to be the grand opening of the Beacon Kitchen. So first, congratulations.
That's right.
On
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
On that. But let's sort of lead up to that, right? Like kind of what got us here. Right. So maybe Miss Yolanda, maybe let the folks
it was
know.
all a dream.
Hey.
Yes, that part.
Yeah, you know, like so let the folks know the origin story behind New Hill.
Well, so essentially, when you talk about like New Hill as a whole, the origin story is there were 2 city council members, Wes Bellamy, Kathy Galvin, that brought together a group of Black business leaders and entrepreneurs to talk about the level of development that was happening in the Charlottesville area.
Okay.
But at that particular time, there was no Black people leading any of the development that was happening. And of course, them being on city council, they also had identified that there was 10 acres of land in the heart of the community in Star Hill that the city owned that essentially was being very underutilized.
Okay.
And so they had this, you know, bright idea. Hey, what if we did something with that land that could, and it's essentially kind of help the city atone for its sins of, you know, declaring eminent domain on Black neighborhoods, raising those neighborhoods, and stifling the growth of wealth within the Black community. And so, you know, you kind of fast forward, and that was like in 2017. And so that was before like the Summer of Hate and everything that was happening. And so, you know, we continued to kind of look, and since most of the folks sitting around the table were entrepreneurs, we really wanted to take an entrepreneurial approach. And so we said, hey, let's form a community development corporation, because that really really has its roots based in entrepreneurism, and it allows you to be able to kind of act more like a business. At least that was the approach that we wanted to take. And then our very first thing out the gate was doing the Star Hill vision plan. And
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. So that, you know, was incredible. But through that process of talking to the community and really hearing from entrepreneurs and from other Black leaders in the community, and just the community as a whole, was that, hey, as Black people, we don't have a lot of spaces that's ours, where we can come together and collaborate and create. Now, it's not that we're not welcome in spaces,
right,
but those spaces weren't created with us in mind.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need places where we can come together and be incubated and really, you know, collaborate and really get a business going. And so that's, you know, what Beacon was born out of. And so we'll talk about that. I'll leave to my partner, David, here to bring us up to speed on Beacon. They looked at me like,
but even before we get to Beacon though, like where does Mr. Givens come into play, right? Like, so you know, have those great accomplishments, and then at some point you needed a director, because you was like, this is bigger than me now, right?
Yes. Oh
like,
my gosh.
Like, so where does Mr. Givens come into play, you know, leading up to Beacon?
So you know, Beacon really, like, we got finished with the plan in 2019 for Star Hill, and then of course we had all these great ideas and plans for 2020, and then 2020 happened, right? And so then it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And so this idea around a shared use commercial kitchen was actually kind of deposited into our mind or my mind when we were going through the process by the folks at List, because they had actually helped fund one up in the Boston area.
Okay.
And when we did our market analysis, what we saw was that most of the activity around startups and Black businesses was happening in the food sector.
Okay.
So we said, hey, if we're going to do something, let's do something where there's already activity, right? And so during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of research, and along with some interns that we had from UVA that was helping with some of that research. And we decided, let's go down this path. Let's start this. We wanted to do a much bigger thing. And we said, you know what, let's start with just the kitchen first. And then eventually we grow that out to where we have like shared office space and shared retail space and things like that to help, to incubate and help grow and expand Black businesses. And so we get the kitchen and everything going, which took a lot. It was not anything that was easy by any stretch of the imagination. It was a lot to kind of get it off the ground, because just like many entrepreneurs, we had no credit, we had no assets, we were new. And so we have to go out and we have to prove to folks that this is something that is viable and it's something that we can do and that they should invest in. And so
uphill battle from the beginning.
Absolutely. But part of what helps something become really viable is having some expertise on your team.
Yeah.
And in walks Mr. Gibbons. And so happened to reached a point where I'm like, okay, I need help. I need support. I need someone that really understands this better than I do in terms of just the financials of working within the food space, right? Someone that has managed large operations. Someone that has, I've managed large operations from a hotel perspective, but like everybody has their niche and expertise. And, and David had what I had seen because I came across David on Indeed. And I was looking at his resume and I was like, God, please let him be Black, And so that was one of the things. And so, but he had all of this experience. I'm like, because I really wanted someone that was like similar background that worked in the hotel space, because I knew what that rigor was like. And so if that person had done it, then I knew that they knew like what the rigor was going to be in a startup. Because a startup requires a lot of hours and a lot of passion and a lot of commitment. And so in looking at his resume with all the work that he had done over the years and the variety of experience, and then just knowing like, okay, this dude is really going to understand how the numbers work. And then also the cultural understanding and being able to relate to the community that we're seeking to serve, like that was super important. And so I reached out and he reached back. I was like, okay, he's interested. Let's have a conversation. And so, I was like, and again, I did a little internet sleuthing, and I like went to his LinkedIn page. I was like,
I thought you were gonna say his Facebook page.
Oh my God, this is awesome. So anyway,
I think I had just like modified my resume or something on Indeed.
He did. And I was like, wait a minute, he did a modification like 2 weeks ago. That means he might be looking.
So David comes into the picture. So man, like tell us though, why New Hill, right? Or like why this project? Because it sounds like you're somebody that maybe had your pick of the litter, like when it comes to different cities, different areas. Like was this an area that you were attracted to, or did Yolanda give you an offer you couldn't refuse?
Well, I was already in the area. I had been working at the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, learning about all the cultural impact that Black people had on food here in Albemarle County. And things just weren't going the way I wanted them to go. So I took a pivot and I went back to Hilton, who I had worked for previously as an executive chef, and took a job across the street at the DoubleTree as a food and beverage director, and had gone back to school and was continuing, my passion for education. Even so much that ironically, I had done a paper on housing justice, which brought me across the subject of the raising of Vinegar Hill. So I was already wanting to transition from food and beverage into social development. So my mind was already there. And so in preparing for the next stage of my life, I guess I had modified my resume and then that flagged Yolanda's attention, and so she set up an arrangement for me to go meet with Chef Antoine.
Antoine, yeah,
over at
shouts out.
Culinary
Shouts out to
A&B, and
Antoine.
then I sat down and had a lovely meeting with Yolanda, and we realized that we kind of are on this, like, thinking of the same objectives.
Yeah,
you know, our vision and our mission in life was really aligning. And I saw that she had begun building up an infrastructure to make real positive change. And it just seemed like my expertise could really help maybe add some gasoline to the project.
And Max, I gotta imagine that this is so empowering to be able to take your talent, right? Like your gift, but then to align it with empowering your people and empowering your community.
Oh man, it's like it was godsend, to be honest. You know, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where my kids are all out of the house. You know, most of them are now graduated from school, so they're doing well. I mean, they even gave me, you know, they told me last holidays, it's like, Dad, you can't say you live for us anymore. You gotta do you. You know, you're free from us. You know, so
that's what's up.
Car paid for, kids out of the house. Basically, I'm just like living for my own personal passions.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
beautiful.
instead of grinding for corporate America, which I somehow fell back to, I'm telling you what, it's like you don't know how like unshackling it is
Right.
to be able to let go of those economic burdens and just do what your heart wants to do.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Family, we are joined by Yolanda Harrell and David Givens of New Hill and the Beacon Kitchen. So, you know, even still before, you know, we dig deep into like where we are with the Beacon Kitchen, you know, I want to make sure folks know as well, you know, like what all is on the horizon for New Hill as well, because I know you have different priorities, as you already kind of alluded to. So if you know, both of you, either one of you could break down sort of the pillars of New Hill, and maybe, you know, sort of like what encompasses the goals, you know, like the big picture, right, of the mission.
Absolutely. So our vision is that of expanding economic opportunities that redefine wealth for a thriving Black community. And we do that in 3 ways. We focus on the personal financial empowerment of the individual and the family. We focus on economic development. That's what Beacon falls under. How do we stand up more Black businesses? How do we expand the existing Black businesses that are already up and running? And then the last is housing. For us, we would like to place an emphasis on ownership, but we understand that, like, you know, before there's ownership, there also needs to be rent that is affordable, right? And so those are the things, because housing, business ownership, those are the most common pathways to wealth creation. And so that's why those things are like our focus. We know those are not the only ways, but those are the 2 most common ways. And so for us, it's, you know, we work with individuals on, you know, improving their personal financial vision. So, you know, where are you financially? Where are you trying to go? And what is the path to get there? And so working with a financial coach that can help guide you, that can help explain some of the things that are affecting you, your ability to realize your dream fully. So that's one aspect of it. And then, of course, with what we're doing with Beacon Kitchen, and David will talk about a few other things that we've got going under that umbrella. That's, you know, removing barriers. That's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to increase everyone's capability, right? By removing the barriers that oftentimes just really, you know, stop us dead in our tracks. And it's not because there's a lack of desire. There's not a lack of resilience. Sometimes the barrier is just too high, right? And so how do we, if we can pull that down some to allow folks to then do their part to get over down, you know, the level that we've been able to bring it down to, then, you know, we see that as like, you know, that's what God has afforded us to be able to do, to be able to increase the pathways towards wealth creation, however we can do that. And of course, ultimately, we'd like to be able to take, you know, what we create from Beacon to be able to fund some of the housing priorities that we have, and creating more opportunity for folks to be able to realize that first time purchase of a home that then allows them to grow and stabilize their family. So those are some of the things that that's who we are. And then, you know, David, you can talk a little bit about like what we're trying to do with it.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, to kind of paraphrase Yolanda, what she just said is our 3 priorities: economic development, financial capability, and housing. And the economic development is really standing up all three of those pillars. And so by really taking this amazing vision of this community kitchen and then incorporating what we've now built as this like managerial curriculum, we're just trying to not only remove the barriers, but also add a level of information and empowerment to be able to level the playing field where people can really actually compete. You know, because opportunity is one thing, but if you don't have, say, the self-esteem and you're still suffering from the imposter syndrome, even a level field isn't really level.
That's
You know, and so we really want to be able to give people the managerial self-esteem and confidence to fail fast enough to actually make their business work.
Yeah. So, and for those listening, right, there's like just hearing this and they're thinking, wow, this is just what I need, right? Like, so what are the different inlets? Like, what are the different avenues? What does it look like to be a part of this mission? Like, whether you're a business owner or whether you may be like a sponsor, you want to be a community partner. Like, what does that aspect just to get involved look like?
Well, you know, I'm going to say, you can start off at newhill.shop. Right?
Okay.
Very, very, very simple way. You can go to newhill.shop, buy a t-shirt, help support the organization. There's almost always a header on that website where you can learn about something more, how you want to get involved. And if you're already there, then I invite you to go to newhilldev.org. And that's going to be extremely informative, and that's going to let you know basically about all our priorities. If you're an entrepreneur and you just want to start your business, I'm going to invite you to go to beaconkitchen.info.
Okay.
And from there, you'll find out about our membership tiers, which is basically what we consider our incubator program. So we have a hourly program where you can just start off pre-venture. You haven't really launched your business yet, and you can join our kitchen at an hourly rate.
Okay.
You're a little bit above that, you can join our kitchen at a part-time rate. And we're thinking that's about 20 hours per week. You're already rocking and rolling, you can join our kitchen at a 40-hour per rate. You're already ready to take it to scale. Well, we can give you a permanent home in our kitchen, full-time reserved, and we have a rate there. And all those rates are on beaconkitchen.info.
Nice. This is awesome.
One of the things that I honestly appreciate about this conversation is just how in touch the two of you are with your project and the service that you provide. That it comes through and you talking about it, and it can resonate so well with those that you intend to serve. Because a lot of times there's a disconnect. If you are of a different nationality than those that you are serving, if you haven't had similar experiences as them, if you don't know how to necessarily connect to the person you're helping, and you're talking like at them instead of with them, it can lower the success rate, right? But what comes through very, very clear in this is just how in tune you are with what you're doing and how to connect with the people that you're doing it for. Abundantly clear. Just want you to know that. And I'm also, this is the first time I've really had the opportunity to listen to the two of you kind of present your project. And it really has a potential to change the scope of our community or those in low income communities here in this city. It's fully taken advantage of. That's a big, big deal. Is it everything that you, Yolanda, everything that you thought it was going to be, or is it even bigger than that?
I think it has the potential, and I don't know that we've done a very good job of really describing like what it is, right? So like Beacon Kitchen, Beacon stands for Black Entrepreneur Advancement and Community Opportunity Network. And so essentially, you know, I just kind of loosely say the shared use kitchen, but like basically what it means is instead of everybody going out and figuring out how to get their own kitchen space, it's like, you know, let's do that together. So we have an 11,000 square foot shared use kitchen. Basically, it has a 74-foot hood with all types of equipment underneath. We have a total of 12 workstations where you can come in, set up, and really start to execute on your vision. So we have freezer space, cooler space, dry storage. We have a beautiful living room.
We got a mini Lowe's.
Yeah. And so we have a loading dock where we can ship and receive, right? So the idea is that you could really run your entire business out of this space until you're ready for that storefront. Like we don't want ultimately this is designed to protect people's financial future.
Okay.
Everybody should have the right to dream and ideate and say, you know what, I'm going to try that without potentially losing all of their savings in the process. And so that's essentially what it's designed to do. It's designed to like give you an opportunity to try it. You may need to pivot in the midst of it. You may decide that I hate this. And guess what? You didn't like completely lock yourself into it financially.
Yeah.
But you were able to like, you know, test drive the dream, right? And so, you know, David.
Well, we like to think of it as a gym.
Yeah.
So it's a gym membership for food entrepreneurs.
Okay.
But unlike other gyms that want you to sign up and never come in, we want you to get into shape and we want you to get out and get on your own.
Yeah.
And another big thing too is we're not trying to peer pressure you into some type of membership that you can't afford. So another priority of New Hill is financial capability. So we have a financial coach, and we're really asking all entrepreneurs that join Beacon to go see our financial coach and come up with a plan financially. And we want to make sure that Beacon is part of that financial plan. And if it's not, then it's not. But what we don't want to do is prey off of people who shouldn't be going into business. We want to find those that are passionate and have actually cleared enough of a runway for their business to actually take off. And if you think you have, and maybe you haven't, this is a safe place for you to kind of find out.
Find out, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So we so as we approach April 5th, grand opening, right? Y'all got butterflies, y'all. Oh,
I don't think, at least I know I haven't slept much, but I don't think either one of us have slept very much. Mainly because, you know, we're really excited about what this opportunity means for our community. But also, you know, keeping it real, like that's a lot of money to build this kitchen, right? And so we also want to see it populated with people that really are taking advantage of the opportunity to really like change the financial trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. And even if, like, one of the things that I want entrepreneurs out there or budding entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about it to understand, let's say you start a business and even if it doesn't work out, what we don't always know is like who's watching. And sometimes it's just your children that's watching and they see that you tried to do something and that sparks something within them and says, you know what, I can try that too. And so, you know, like ideally, you know, we want to see people become successful. But that may not be the way that you are successful. You may not ultimately own your own business, or this particular run at a business may inspire you to do a different type of business that you then like, boom, that's it. I learned a lot from that. And what I learned there is transferable over here.
Get some crossover skills.
Yeah.
I love that. And I promise I'm not like a paid sponsor or anything like that, but I just love to hear a good success story is always wonderful. But just to hear a dream and listen to how it came to fruition and how it is a benefit to people. But there are a ton of people walking around who have these aspirations. If I'm honest, I guess I found myself in the same situation a time or two, who have no idea where to begin. You know, I got everything else. I mean, I got the will, I got the drive, I got the idea, but I don't know where do I begin? This is like a tangible, you know, your project is a tangible place of where to begin. And I think our community really, really needs to understand that.
For sure. So kind of walk us through. So April 5th, 12, I believe you want folks to register to attend, right?
You can go on Eventbrite.
Okay, so it's on Eventbrite. So kind of walk us through that day. What are we registering for? What can we expect?
All right. So from 12 to 1, we're going to have our ribbon cutting grand opening ceremony, a couple local politicians coming out. And then from 1 to 4, we're going to have a nice block party. Local DJ Runway is going to be out there.
Okay.
Right. We're going to have about 5 or 6 entrepreneurs out there serving their food. We're giving the first 100 people $10 in food tickets. We're also going to have a bar out there. We're going to be selling some drink tickets and food tickets as well. So it's going to be great food, live entertainment. Oh, I forgot. My man Nathaniel Starr will be performing as well.
All right.
Right. So food, drinks, music, good time.
Yeah. Good stuff. That is what's up. So we are talking to David and Yolanda of New Hill Development. And You want to add on to any of that?
I was
Yolanda?
just saying, and we'll also give you an opportunity to tour the kitchen. So
Okay.
that way you can see, for those that are just curious and those that want to come in and say, okay, look, this is what my future work space is going to be looking like. We certainly want to have you to come out and take a look.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Awesome. So, and I heard you mention, like different ways, like folks get involved and whatnot. Like, so what's some of the, go ahead and take the opportunity to shout out, like some of the community partners and whatnot, like folks, that have been a part of this journey, like to help this come to fruition. Because I'm sure the listeners would love to know, like, who else in our community, right? Especially in sort of the political climate we're in right now. Like, folks want to know who the allies are.
Ooh,
So,
yeah. So what was really interesting is Stephen Davis with CIC.
Shout out to CIC.
Okay.
They were the first ones in, and what I appreciated about Stephen, he said, "Listen, nobody wants to be the first one in. Everybody wants to wait to other folks have put their money at risk, and so we'll go first."
Okay.
And so CIC gave us a $500,000 loan to do this project. And just so you know, this project is about 3.4 million. So it's not it's not an inexpensive project. Maybe to others. For us, it's pretty expensive, right? Depends on how your money stacks. And so with that, we were able to then get others to the table. So the city of Charlottesville, the Department of Economic Development, they gave us grants. The Charlottesville.
Shout out to Chris Engel.
Yes. CACF.
Okay.
Shout out to Ebony Bug.
Yes, absolutely. They gave us a huge grant as well to support. Then we ended up getting a loan with Locus Impact Investing Group. That was how we were able to finish the project, or at least get it to a finishing point of where it is right now. We also got a grant from the Weisberg Foundation. They gave us a capacity building grant, which allowed us to be able to bring on more people. Okay. So those were like some of the major. Am I missing anybody? And oh my gosh, yeah, Ann and Jean Worrell. Thank you, Quentin. Ann and Jean Worrell was like probably the largest donors that gifted us funding to support operations and support paying down debt. And it is truly come at a very timely point because a large part of our strategy was preparing and getting ready for federal funding, right? And so we know where that is right now. It's a little iffy, right? And so, but yeah, so lots of folks, that really came through, and it took a while, right? It wasn't like overnight. And I stress that because I think that like that's the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, right? Folks don't just jump on board because you say it's a great idea. Like you really have to show and prove. And I also shout out to the folks with PB&J Kitchen. They allowed us, they put us in a position to see them in the kitchen space that they had developed out so that we could start to pilot the program, which then gave us some information that we can then say to, some of the folks that kind of came to the party late and say, hey, this is what we've been doing for the last couple of years. It allowed us to be able to start our own earned revenue stream, which is supporting early learning centers with lunch, with Bear Early Learning, with Boys and Girls Club. And then David, why don't you tell them about the School Bites program?
So one of the channels that we have for catering within Beacon, and it's really designed to help the entrepreneurs that we incubate learn the dynamic structure of a la carte ordering. It's called School Bites, Beacon School Bites. And it's really we built this for private schools within Albemarle County that don't have kitchens within. So the parents can go on beaconschoolbites.com and they can order meals for their kids that we make from scratch and deliver daily to the private schools that we work with. Shout outs to Peabody, Mountaintop Montessori, and Charlottesville J School.
Nice. That is good stuff. Good stuff. So, if y'all wouldn't mind, like since you alluded to it, Mrs. Harrell, in this political climate, like what we're facing, and you look at the great work that like that you all do. Like, how should we be thinking about sort of building a hedge around projects such as New Hill? Like, is there any discussion about like maybe we need to move differently or anything? Because like anything that seems to be helping any marginalized group, right? Like seems like anything where we're trying to be equitable, right? Is sort of at threat, and people threaten to pull back funding and things of that sort. Do we feel like that Charlottesville is almost as safe as we can get, as far as to be able to keep nurturing this, this kind of thing? But I'm just curious, in this environment that we're in right now, like, what are your thoughts just about that, about, like this being sustainable in the face of the political climate?
I would say try to prop your business up without subsidies, build a real for-profit business, and your business have a competitive advantage, and make sure that your revenue covers all your margins. I mean, that's the strongest way to live through any political climate, is that,
agree.
Your cost of goods, your labor, and your business makes money, and you don't need the help, even though we all need help. So that's kind of hard to say.
Right. No, I feel you. Yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah, I think, for us, our goal as an organization was always to get to a place where we could have enough earned revenue that we didn't have to depend on grants, but it's a journey to get to that point, right? So you don't just jump out of the gate and like, boom, we're there, because we're not there yet, right? And so we do depend on, the charitable community. We do the philanthropic community. And so our goal is, we're working towards that, and in time we will get there. So yeah, in this moment, it is definitely critical, because what it is going to do is it's going to create way more competition at the local level for grants, for philanthropic support. What we have experienced in the past was, especially as a grassroots organization, is that people love to support the big known names, right? They love to support the things that they can easily identify and say, I understand that, I know what that is, I know what they do. It takes a little bit more education on our part in order to help them see why should they care about us. But I do think that there are a number of folks out there that are like, we care about inclusivity in our community. We care about whether or not folks are playing on an equitable playing field. We care about Black, brown, we care about all the things. And so they want to continue to support. When it comes to the federal level, obviously that looks a little bit different right now. And that does have an impact on us. We do have grants that are federally funded that are questionable as to whether or not we actually get reimbursed those dollars. And so that's a real thing. That's a real thing we have to navigate, right? But as we move forward in the future, it also helps us to strategize. Now, granted, it's a little bit difficult right now because we don't know all this going to change, right? But at the end of the day, as David mentioned, like, we have to be thinking about earned revenue and how do we make sure that we can support. But I think one of the things that we have to also think about is collaboration. Like, we can't all be out here just trying to do it all on our own. Nobody got to the top doing it all by themselves. There is no such thing as they did not need help from somebody. We all do. And so the more we can collaborate on things and come together, then we can all get further faster.
Right.
Yeah. Because like, one of my hopes, David, and I kick it to you, like, through this, is that folks will remember like how powerful we are together. Because as you're empowering individuals, it's so easy for us to just say, I got mine, get yours, But I'm definitely I'm hoping that we, as a community, can remember that, like, sticking together through this, like keeping that bond, like keeping that unison as I grow my business, right? It's still, still remember that this is sort of the foundation. So even when they're able to leave the kitchen, remember that, like, that this is the foundation, and we don't kick the ladder, right?
I feel like, you're talking about like the scarcity mindset. Like, there's not enough to go around, but a rising tide lifts all boats. So necessarily me doing better doesn't mean that there's less for you. It just means that maybe now more money comes into the area. And so with more visitation, with more food destinations, more people coming in to eat restaurants, now we're all actually doing better. So I just wanted to use that as an opportunity to shout out 434 Catering, going to be at an event. Chrissy Cake's going to be at an event. Pearl Island, going to be at an event. But to leave anybody out. DC Cuisines,
Vegan comfort soul.
Vegan Soul Comfort Food. Come out and support these entrepreneurs. Keeping our dollar circulating in our community is another great way.
That's it.
To help keep our economy growing.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank y'all. So lastly, unless Ms. Max got something, or unless Q tell me that we forgetting something, like part of this empowerment has been a consistent thread, really since the inception of our show, but particularly now, again, because of the social climate that we're in, and recognizing that it's more important than ever, potentially for us to learn how to be self-sufficient, like I'm hearing David say in so many ways, and how to empower each other is so important, right? So, but within that, it's March, it's Women's History Month, so been taking every opportunity to say Happy Women's History Month.
Thank you.
Right, to Yolanda, and I'm gonna put Yolanda on the spot, on a pedestal right now, right? Because we have accomplished, right, and what you started is women's history, like, and I don't think that that should be overlooked. It's like this is a milestone. It's something that people will look back, in history of Charlottesville and be like, like Yolanda Harrell did that, and that's what it became and whatnot. So wanted to give you your flowers on that, for sure. Yeah. And you guys feel free to chime in this Women's History Month, in the history that like all the women at New Hill are making alongside you guys.
Definitely, because I would say a lot of days it really feels like a women-led organization. So I'm happy to add a little bit of fraternal energy.
They let you talk every now and then.
So the only thing I would say.
Come on in.
The only thing I would say is that my wife is doing what God has called her to do.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why the challenges.
That makes a difference.
The challenges are there, but she's navigating them with all the blessings that she's had in her life.
Yeah.
From the people that raised her and her experiences.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. Thank y'all. So, before Miss Max closes, it's David. Just let them know once again what's happening April 5th. What time?
April 5th at 12 o'clock. Ribbon cutting ceremony, 221 Carlton Road. Come see DJ Runway. Come see Pearl Island, 434 Catering, Vegan Soul Comfort Food, DC Cuisines, Chrissy Cakes. Come get a tour of Beacon Kitchen. Come check out Beacon Kitchen at beaconkitchen.info. Learn all about New Hill at newhilldev.org and help support us at newhill.shop.
There you go.
I'm impressed he knew the website off the top of his head, because most people are like, let me get back. I'll post it on your Facebook page.
Yeah, and we put those links in the feed here as well, family. So y'all definitely check those out. But Miss Max, what else you got?
I have nothing to add to that conversation. I want to thank David and Yolanda for joining us, sharing their Sunday with us here on In My Humble Opinion Talk Show. Of course, thank you to our listening audience. Can never end the show without letting you know how much you appreciate it. And I do hope that you learned something today. You heard something that you can carry with you, makes you a little more empowered and enlightened, if you will. And just know that we appreciate you. Okay. Until next time, just make sure you take care of yourself, take care of each other. We'll see you soon.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion
with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.